the incubation of the irrelevance was letting like a sort of like dying. It was like all of that momentum and all of that goal seeking. See, what it mostly comes down to for me that I found was a sort of energetic overcompensation for insignificance that never got metabolized from my childhood. Of course, it never really ends, but it's taken 3 years to really become familiar and friendly with the irrelevance and with the insignificant and with the ugly and with the incapable and with the unworthy parts of me. And so that energy that went into overcompensating and trying to be someone, now it can be redeployed for other things. And so that grasping isn't as much there anymore. So I feel much lighter. I'm happier.
Mhm.
I have more time to be with my kids and to do projects that are meaningful. And yes, just like you, it's less lucrative, it's less visible, it doesn't make a splash or sensation or whatever. It's much more modest, it's much more humble, it's more satisfying. Thank God it pays the bills, but not much more than that. It's just that devil's bargain has been undone.
Miles Neale, thanks for joining me on the podcast.
Brian, thanks for having me. I'm excited to explore our conversation today and see what corridors of the labyrinth we walk down together.
Yeah, I appreciate that spirit. Um, I was excited to speak with you too. I've been looking through your newest book, Return with Elixir, and man, there's a lot of parallels on our paths. This journey to soul from spiritual practice and exploration to this, what we might call soul work. And so I feel like we're on similar paths in many ways.
Yeah, and I agree. I think also some strong criticism of our culture and the way that it commodifies and institutionalizes and reifies, I think is also an echo in our work. And so it's a great synergistic opportunity for us to see what's in common and also what might be different.
Yeah. Before we get to like the story of your personal journey, I thought maybe we could start with a kind of a bigger picture view. In your book, I think you've done a really great service for the reader in that you've provided like a broad overview of where we are in the modern West and how we got there.
Mm.
And you've pulled together a lot of different narratives from the cosmic to the cultural, drawing from people like Carl Jung, Joseph Campbell, even Ian McGilchrist, and then going all the way back to narratives about the big eon shifts and astrology and all of that. It's stuff that like over the years I've kind of cobbled together, trying to piece together like where we're at, how we got here, what it means to be in the West, and all of that stuff. And so you've like pulled together all this fairly concisely, about as concisely as you probably could. And I'm going to make a big ask of you if you could like perhaps try to do like a summary of some of that.
Yeah. Well, first, thank you for recognizing it. For me, I'm always scared I'll leave myself open to tremendous. Since I'm a critic of culture, I also leave myself open to a lot of criticism when you try to do as ambitious work as I tried to do, venturing into territory that's not my specialty and thatching together multiple traditions. You can get this kind of watered down effect or superficial read, which any expert in any one of those traditions would, call me to task. So given that, I also just am a human being curious about where we are. And as a father of two kids, I also want to know where we're going. And I think around about the time that the pandemic was happening, I could see sort of the telltale signs of something much larger looming. And with everything sort of breaking down and collapsing from institutions to society to civil unrest, the ecology, I was looking for answers. And so, much like the way you described your own curiosity, I just began a process of cobbling together what I could glean from different disciplines because it didn't seem that any one model could capture the entire territory. I guess in a nutshell, I just, to maybe try to connect with your listener, it's, where we are right now is in a fundamental state of civilizational collapse. And I'm not a doomsdayer. I just call it how it is. We around us, we are, um, you know, we're situated in time and place in such a way where our civilization is at its tail end. And the most immediate kind of reverberations of that are that the economic sort of paradigm is teetering on the edge. Fiat currency is inflated to its full extent, and the stock market is totally inflated. It's a deck of cards ready to implode. But if you look at each dimension of human activity, whether it be political, you also see this kind of inflation, or in a way, maybe it's more contraction politically, where it seems that all the countries are in a way, led by some narcissistic oligarch who's ready to move towards nationalism. And so it's a corrupt land grab or overreach. And then you just start looking ecologically and in medicine and big agra and energy, and you just start to see that it's just looking like we're at the tail end of something. And on the other side of it, it's not yet clear where we're going. The short answer to sort of talk about how we got there, the most favored map that I found that really spoke to the larger picture was the cosmological map of the Vedic system. Now, that Vedic map really discusses a kind of trajectory or arc some 25,000 years. It's shared in common with Mesoamerica, the Vedic tradition. The Tibetans have it, the Indians have it, the Greeks had it. It's also astrological. It's called the precession of the equinoxes. They basically talk about a high point of civilization and the expansion of consciousness in a period of global harmony that goes on a trajectory of some 12,000 years in a kind of descent. And as that consciousness descends, it leads into kind of chaos and disequilibrium. And we have shorter and shorter lifespans, and we have, more egocentric, we're led and misguided by more egocentric urges until we hit a kind of pivotal turning point where it's really dire. And according to some researchers out there, including Bibhu Das Mishra, who did a very, very good study of the Vedic system and recalculated some of the equations, we pass this threshold of what's called the Kali Yuga, or the Dark Age, somewhere in March 2025 this year. So we're basically at a turning point. We're at the darkest night of the soul on a threshold crossing towards an ascension, another 12,000 year arc where consciousness begins to expand, where harmony is and ethics and integrity are reclaimed, where lifespans are elongated, where high technology and remembrance of ancient civilization and high technology are rediscovered. And that leads, 12,000 years back to the apex, and it goes around and around like that. So when I read that, it put into very clear resolution all the kind of telltale signs that we see around us as a sort of this is part of the Kali Yuga collapse. And what I really wanted to do wasn't scare people, but I wanted to prepare people like we're going through an initiation much larger than any one lifetime. And that actually there's a hopeful and purposeful opportunity for each of us, because at this pivotal time where everything is collapsing, it's really incumbent on human beings to try to strive for integrity. That's the single most important thing that we can contribute, because it lays the foundation for future civilizations and generations to come. So I'll turn it back over to you, because maybe it's still too vague, but I'd love for you to be involved in the conversation. So please.
Hmm. Yeah. Well, you also draw on like Western narratives about different eons, right? Like so, Carl Jung in his book Ion, he talks about we're moving from a Piscean age to an Aquarian age. And I always found that very compelling because it comes from the Western perspective and it incorporates, what role does Christianity play in all of this? I wonder if you could just speak a little bit about that.
Yeah, that's so, I liken this to like a Swiss chronographic clock where there's different interconnected dials. My book covers four traditions: cosmology, Jung, mythology of Joseph Campbell, and the Tibetan Tantras. And Jung was very astute and very informed, particularly in the as you well know, towards the latter part of his career with astrology. And so interconnected with this long 25,000 year cycle, the precession of the equinoxes, the zodiac fits perfectly into that. If we look at it as a clock with 12 hours, each of the 12 zodiac signs occupies somewhere on the order of 12 to 2,150 years. And so for the last 2,150 years, we have been in the Piscean age. That began with Christ and is symbolized by the two fishes swimming in different directions, and also symbolic, metaphoric, symbolic, archetypal of this kind of idea that there's a heaven and an earth. There's a kind of a duality in between the heavenly world and the world and the human realm, or the human earthly experience. Anyway, that Christ comes as the archetype of the main signature of the Piscean age, and it's also not a coincidence that at the tail end of the Piscean age, we see the three monolithic traditions that began the Piscean age vie for supremacy in the welcome, my friend. Who do we have here?
This is Suki.
Hi, Suki.
Yeah.
Um, we see at the tail end of the Piscean age this sort of vide of sort of like the monolithic traditions, Islam, Christianity, and Judaism, sort of duking it out in the guise of political, geopolitical warfare. But it's got this sort of archetypal feeling of like the last stand of the biblical time. So I also see that this is going to heat up. This is not coincidence just because at this current time a peace deal may have been signed. I don't think it's going to stand. I think it's going to deteriorate because I think it's sort of the last push of this old Piscean energy, before we actually transition. And Jung saw the transition, as many astrologers do. We're heading into what's called the Aquarian Age, and the Aquarian Age is another period of 2,150 years, and its impulse has a different archetypal signature. And so what is coming in is an energy that could be characterized as much more, let's say, I've kind of distilled it into four Ds. One of the Ds is just uh, uh, decentralization. Okay, and what decentralization is instead of the guru on top, or the oligarch on top, or the CEO on top of a corporate structure, pyramid structure with the working class and then and below, disempowered. We're moving more into a mandala structure where everybody has a voice and everybody makes a contribution, and more of a nodal network. And of course, at the tail end of this, we have the World Wide Web, we have Bitcoin and blockchain. We see the beginnings of a more decentralized kind of environment. Now, these civilizational runs of 2,100 years are lengthy, and so they also within them have subphases. And Jung in Aeon, one of his last writings, was a little bit, he had a kind of ominous prediction about at least the initial transitory period. He was a little, um, concerned, and rightfully so, I think, because it's almost like every shift in Aeon, there's a period of adolescence, and you're actually coming out of chaos, right? Because the former civilization is collapsing, and it presents problems for the new generation and the new civilization to course correct. But that transitional phase and the transitions between these aeons are somewhere on the order of 80 years, let's say, at least a full 80-year time span of transition, like the time between tides. And we fall right there right now, according to many astrologers. We're right there in the transition. We're in the wash. And Jung thought, okay, he was sort of predictive that of one key thing that really caught my attention in his writing. What he was mainly concerned of is that the beginning of the Aquarian Age would be marked by a period a very high technology and a technological advancement that far exceeded our moral capacity. And I think that is a striking claim that I think is bearing out in truth, because with the rise of AI and nuclear, I think, and if you look around, I mean, we are seeing just how morally bankrupt all our institutions are. The level of corruption and self-interest is, and the pandemic is a great case for this. It's like the media and the pharma and the governments are in cahoots to absolutely co-opt civilization to fill their pockets and to feed their hunger for power. And now you have this great technology of AI. Who knows how easily it is to dupe and control people with it. And so he had every right to be concerned that the first 500 years of this transition to the new aeon would be very, very, very bumpy and deadly, actually. And we would almost devour ourselves. And so we have to be very discerning, which is another key D archetype or archetypal energy of the incoming Aquarian age. People have to really not just rely. You talk about McGilchrist, who's the great neuroscientist who's talking about the brain hemispheres and how we've pendulum swinged over the last 500 years, let's say, from a we had the age of reason that made us become hyper logical and rational, and that has brought us great innovations in medicine and technology, but it also, you and I share this concern that it also disenfranchised the soul and we became overly reductionistic and materialistic. Now we have to reclaim that pendulum, has to come center, not the other way. It can't swing to the superstitious dogma of religion. It has to kind of, spirit and science have to come together, and we have to reclaim ethics and a moral foundation and a connection with spirit and as Rick Tarnas, the great cosmologist, say, reignite or revivify the disenchanted world. And so that's what Jung, I think, was saying. It's going to be bumpy, but each of us has an opportunity to be very discerning about how we're being duped and how we're being over propagandized and how we're being manipulated and controlled, and to have some part of ourselves reclaim intuition and strong discernment and a critical capacity, and to yoke that with our intelligence so that we can actually, reclaim our sovereignty as we move through this really turbulent time.
Yeah. Yeah. Well said. Um, gosh. Yeah. And I guess then the book, the idea is that you're providing four different maps for how to navigate the coming times and how to find that sense of integrity within ourselves and I think with the world too.
Yes, I mean, each of these maps, a map, it's a little ironic and tongue in cheek. As you know, the map is not the terrain. And so, these are models, but they're not. I tell people this. I mean, I say I've provided some maps. They're not my maps. Of course, these are very well established maps. Anyone can find them. But what I was trying to do is sort of synthesize them and
Mhm.
make a patchwork so that we had a broader view of our situation in time and space. But the real thing is to go on a journey, because I mean, I love pilgrimage and we can talk about pilgrimage, but in a way, just speaking to your listener, like our civilization is, we're not going back. The pandemic was a portal and a harbinger of things to come. If you think it's going to get, more smooth in your lifetime, my lifetime, we're wrong. It's going to get more bumpy. And so we are in a civilizational initiation or rite of passage, and we're on a journey. And a journey means you have to learn how to let go of the old world and the old self and your old identity. And you have to start to see that the universe and our position in time and space and our unconscious, as Jung would say. I love this about Jung, that the collective unconscious is initiating us. What does that mean? It's preparing us for the new world that's coming. And so if you really heed it and you really listen to it and you really look around, and I've been doing this. I'm sorry to take a little detour here, but I'm curious about if this is resonant for you. I'm here on the island of Bali, and I have, when I have a deep conversation with somebody, it seems like we're having one conversation. If I, there's a lot of people on a journey when they come to Bali, and if you get their ear over coffee or a smoothie bowl or whatever the hell it is that you're in Bali, it seems to be one conversation, and that is, it goes something like this, and then I'll turn it over to you if you're having the same kind of experiences. Our professional identities aren't adding up. The person that we think we were or spent 10, 15, or 25 years building is collapsing, no longer makes sense. The value set is changing. I've transitioned in some way. I've left security in order to chase freedom. I've left dysfunctional relationships or corporate environments that were stifling. I've had a series of either visions or panic attacks or, troubling sensibilities. I've taken plant medicine and seen something unordinary or extraordinary. I've left one locality and ventured forth into another. I've had to tighten my belt. I've lost income. I've left behind baggage and accumulated goods and materials that were once useful and important to me that are no longer important to me. I'm looking for a kind of tribe, or I'm looking for a new collective. I'm looking for a new place to put my energy. It's not quite clear where it is and what it is, but I'm looking for an energetic alignment. This is the kind of conversation that without fail I'm having with multiple people. And what it tells me is that there's some impulse from the collective unconscious that's initiating us, and we're losing something or shedding something like a snake shedding its skin, and we're not quite clear where we're heading, but we're going into the unknown. And I think those people that have probably around the last 3, 4, 5 years since the pandemic, because the pandemic is such a great catalyst, a subset of people like myself volunteered for that. And another subset of people resisted it and doubled down and really tried to go to shore up the security and shore up the identity and shore up the old world. But it's coming for all of us. And if we really truly believe what Jung was saying about the collective unconscious is on our side, there's something about the collective unconscious that's guiding us. There's something about the collective unconscious that has our best interests at heart, even when it looks terrifying and it destroys us. There's something that's necessary in that rite of passage or preparation that's actually preparing us for what's coming, even though we may not be able to see it. And this is where the resorting to the intuition is really important, because it transcends rationality. Like these decisions that people are making, they don't seem to make sense. It's not,
Mhm.
the calculus doesn't add up, but a lot of people are doing it. What is it that we're doing? Where is it that we're going? What does it add up to? I mean, I'm not the only one with kids that are doing this. You'd say that's you're being reckless. But in another way, no, we're listening to something.
Mhm.
What has your experience been like?
Yeah, well, I felt like you just described my life about 20 years ago. You know, I was newly married, had achieved a lot of success as a graphic designer working in advertising, living in the big city, bought a house, new car, all that stuff, all of the kind of external markers of success should have added up to me being pretty happy and contented with my life. But I found myself increasingly unhappy and uncomfortable. Waking up with night sweats, having panic attacks at the end of a yoga class, lying in shavasana, having like increased kind of anxiety going into the office every day, feeling the oppression of the corporate demands on my time and my life energy and my creativity until something had to give, and I went to a depth psychologist to do some counseling, and we went into my dreams and started to kind of look back at my life and reclaim some things that I'd kind of left behind in my pursuit of material success. And, that eventually led me to working with ayahuasca. And
Hmm.
I could no longer live the life I'd been living. And so, yeah, took a big leap, left everything, made some really kind of illogical, irrational moves, ended up on an island on the west coast of Canada and started training to become a yoga teacher. And, that's led to me doing the work now, which is very much often guiding people through this very similar kind of transition. And so here
Yeah.
we are.
So it sounds like, almost to a T, a very similar initiation rite of passage. You had the telltale signs, just like me, the panic attacks and the sense that it was off and it wasn't working out. You had reached the pinnacle of your career. Myself had a similar thing: a nice house, beautiful kids, and a wife. The degrees and all the rest of it, the attributes, and it just was hollow. So yeah, I think this is I think it's more common than not. And what I chalk it up to with the maps that we're talking about in Return with Elixir, both is this large civilizational map, the cosmological impulse, but also Jung in the sense that, I do trust, people in the New Age world, they say trust the universe. I don't know about that. I mean, the way I like Jung's model for this is that, the impulse comes from the collective unconscious, and there's something deeply intuitive inside of us if we can listen, and it comes in a different language.
Mhm.
It comes through dreams, it comes through synchronicities, it comes through intuitions, it comes through visionary experience. I think the psychedelic revolution has a part to play in this, although you and I will both share some criticism about its shadow, which is on full display right now. um, but I think you and I both share that personal experience, but we're also now in a space, since we did take the initiatory path voluntarily, we're now in a position to sort of help facilitate or support the unraveling of other journeymen and fellow pilgrims on the big adventure. And it does involve a dark night of the soul. You don't get to the other side without being shredded.
Mhm.
I wonder if you have a comment about your own, the pain point and how difficult it also was, because, when we have these kinds of conversations in the quick version
Mhm.
narrative, it can seem very seamless. But when I speak for myself, like, I traveled and transitioned to Bali. I now live on this, beautiful enchanted island. No, my experience was 3 years of living hell here for the first 3 years, where I felt like I was absolutely disemboweled in my DNA and didn't, rendered myself unrecognizable to myself and
Mhm.
was in tears most of the time. So, initiation is hard and painful, and rightfully so. It needs to be. Now, there's no other way. Otherwise, it's not initiation.
Mhm.
Do
Yeah.
you have comment about that?
Yeah, totally. I mean, you brought up the image of the snake shedding its skin, and I think, we use that metaphor often, but maybe we don't stick with the image enough. If you've seen a snake shedding its skin, it's like the old skin becomes dry, constricting. In order to get the skin off, the snake is rubbing up against rough edges.
Mm,
There's an old fairy tale where a woman marries a snake and she's got to like help him peel off the skin. And every time she peels off one of his skins, he's screaming. Like Robert Bly does an incredible telling of it, and he's just wailing, really
mm,
evoking the kind of pain involved in this transformation, which like can get kind of glossed over when we talk about it, when we're selling our coaching services on the website, right?
yeah,
It's
yeah,
like a better life awaits you. Well,
yeah.
okay, but what that better life looks like may actually be in some ways a much more difficult life because
Mm,
of the like for me the unwillingness to compromise myself anymore
mm,
for money, for
mm,
fame, anything like
mm.
that. So it's meant making far less money than I did at the height of my career.
Yeah.
But I mean, part of the evolution has been like needing less and wanting less. And so like my lifestyle has kind of adjusted to my income in a way that it seems to be working so far. But I'm not yeah, like you said, there's different values and different measures of happiness and success and fulfillment that
Yeah.
have far less to do with monetary gain.
Yeah. Yeah. Or striving for reputation. Yeah.
Yeah.
Or or being validated, by large swaths of population. Yeah. Yeah. And it's painful. It's a painful lesson. You sit on the other side of it now, more yourself, as Jung would say. You've embarked and successfully on the path of individuation to become more of who you were meant to be. You went through the initiatory phases. They were challenging and difficult. And this Robert Bly mention that you have there, I think, is perfect. I mean, it's excruciating. Um, and it's not always so glamorous on the other side of it, but it's qualitatively more satisfying. Let's put it that way,
Mhm.
because it's closer to the wholeness. It's unglamorized. It's not Instagram worthy. It's not a quick fix. There is no ascent to the light without the descent into the darkness. But there's something much more integrated about it, stable, mature, um, and fulfilling on the other side. Yeah, so I'm glad that, I feel like, just in that we're discovering that we share a lot more in common just as the conversation keeps going. It's mutually reinforcing for the kind of work that we do and the journey that we've been on.
Yeah, and hopefully for people listening who are going through their own initiation and maybe just feeling the kind of beginnings of that, the increasing discomfort, dissatisfaction, disillusionment, all of that, and looking for answers. I mean, one of the things that we have to deal with in this day and age is when people are suffering, they get online and they start looking for help, you know, and they're just completely inundated with different claims, different promises,
Yeah.
different programs, and it can be really hard to navigate
Well,
through all of
well
that.
marketed schemes, well marketed schemes that are presenting enticing little, packages.
Yeah, well, selling solutions,
Yeah,
right?
very, very good solutions. Yeah, I always think about that. The people that are in control of the best marketing, usually win the race.
But are they really winning?
Well, that's true. I mean, yes, we
Like
can
if you
say that.
gotta sell your soul being on Instagram
Yeah,
or TikTok for the better part of your day, and being on every kind of therapy conference summit online thing, just constantly out there selling, that's not the kind of life that I wanna live. That doesn't feel like a very
yeah,
soulful life for me.
yeah,
In
yeah.
some ways, this unwillingness to compromise my soul, my integrity, kind of keeps me on the outside, keeps me in the underground, and I've learned that I'm like quite happy there, actually.
I couldn't agree with you more. I mean, I'm basically invisible now. I don't have that the same sort of visibility and what came with it was opportunity, and the phone stopped ringing when I came to Bali. And in a way, part of my dark night on here, and what was so excruciating for me was a period of about 3 years of incubating my irrelevance. And so, and then sometimes
Mm.
that stops people in their tracks, and they want to comfort me. They want to jump in and say, "Oh no, your life has been really meaningful, and
Mhm.
you've helped me so much, and you're so vital and critical to saving me, and all this." They're trying to pick me up because they think that I shouldn't be so dark and despairing when I say that my life has amounted to nothing, and I was dissolving in my 25 years of my identity, and my work output meant nothing. And when I say I was incubating irrelevance, it actually, I'd have it no other way. Um, because on the other side of it is exactly what you said, like, I'm not chasing my tail anymore. That grind, I'm not in the grind anymore. it was a hard slog to, to strive for visibility and to strive for opportunity and to climb the ladder and to put out publications. And once you put it out, it's not enough, right? You have to then do it again and again and again. And if you lose traction, then it's disheartening. And then you're always worried about when the next opportunity and how well will it go. And you're so fixated on it that you're missing your life. And if you're a father like me of two young kids, all of a sudden you wake up one day and maybe the best parts of the time that you have with them is gone, or your wife, you haven't spent enough time with her, or you haven't spent enough time with what's really meaningful, because you've been in this, little bubble or circuit or circuitry or whatever you want to call it. The incubation of the irrelevance was letting like a sort of like dying. It was like all of that momentum and all of that goal seeking and all of that unconscious. See, what it mostly comes down to for me that I found was a sort of energetic overcompensation for insignificance that never got metabolized from my childhood. And so it's taken, of course, it never really ends, but it's taken 3 years to really become familiar and friendly with the irrelevance and with the insignificant and with the ugly and with the incapable and with the unworthy parts of me. And so that energy that went into overcompensating and trying to be someone, now it can be redeployed for other things. And so that grasping isn't as much there anymore. So I feel much lighter. I'm happier.
Mhm.
I have more time to be with my kids and to do projects that are meaningful. And yes, just like you, it's less lucrative, it's less visible, it doesn't make a splash or sensation or whatever. It's much more modest, it's much more humble, it's more satisfying. Thank God it pays the bills, but not much more than that. It's just that that devil's bargain has been undone.
Mhm. Yeah. Yeah, there's a lot more freedom to be oneself, right? Without all that pressure
Mm,
to be the kind of polished professional persona that people would expect, when you're at a certain kind of tier of fame and celebrity and authority and expertise, you know?
exactly. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, a while ago, I was talking to my friend Eric Davis. I don't know if you know him and his work, but he introduced me to this little guy who is
Is
Grover,
Oh,
but
Grover.
he's standing in front of a big zero, and he's shrugging his shoulders, saying like, "I don't know." And he showed me the little figure he had, or it was like on the shelf behind him. I said, "What?" And it immediately became like a kind of
That's it.
an archetypal figure for me. So I,
Yes.
I found one on like eBay or something, and we're starting this club of the know nothings.
Oh, can I have one? I would love to join.
And it's just like, well, I don't know, like, it's like here's some stuff that I've explored, I've found useful for myself, but like you said about the maps not being the territory, feel free to chuck it away, but it might be helpful. It might be helpful to look at some of this stuff.
And particularly if we return to this idea of the larger map, if we were being initiated, all of this is suspect and open for criticism, and it's just a hypothesis. But if we were being initiated, and you and I and many others that we've talked to are incubating their unworthiness or their insignificance, or, like being okay with not being famous or being okay with not being successful or being okay, well, whatever metric, that qualitative, standardized metric that pushed us through college and into our careers, that generational impetus. If we were being initiated and that Grover archetype is like resonant in our field as a result of our preparation, what would it suggest about where we're going as a civilization? For me, it means like, yeah, get ready because those impetuses that you grew up with aren't going to be relevant where we're going. It's going to, the impulse for a so-called ladder climb of success and validation and wide swaths of people and fame and fortune and all that, if we're incubating our irrelevance and we're becoming more local, and you're happy on an island in relative obscurity, but you're having more satisfying conversations and gratifying conversations, and your work is much more modest in scale, but much more enriching, that might be a telltale sign of where we're going. And in fact, we're now ready to receive that, and we're ready to occupy spaces of facilitation within that. Because the world is shifting towards a new eon, what will come with it will be a different value set. And so maybe this is kind of what it looks like,
Hmm.
you know.
I mean, I think so. It does for me anyway. Like, finding my way to the work that I do wasn't in the plans for me. You know, I was a creative. I was a graphic designer. And then one day I realized that I'd rather do something else. But then as I started doing that and my path started unfolding in front of me, and I started to do this deep work with individuals, I realized that this is what I always longed for, was deep connection with other people. And that's only possible in the one-on-one interaction, really, or maybe a small group. But the one-on-one is like where you said, like you said, the dialogue becomes a kind of a shared conversation. It's there's an intimacy there. There's a deep satisfaction that I get from that, from the work that I do, and from these kind of conversations,
Mm,
which aren't just about selling books. You know, they're about
mm,
making connections with other like-minded souls out in the world, because
mm,
that's what I long for.
mm,
And the kind of satisfaction I get from that outshines any kind of more large scale fame or recognition that I might get. That stuff, it doesn't go deep. You know, maybe I get a little twinge when, a particular thing that I put out gains some traction or gains some attention, but it's nothing like the deep, heartfelt
mm,
satisfaction I get. Like I
mm,
had a guy just start working with me who I met in the Amazon jungle maybe 8 years ago.
mm,
Young guy from Sweden, kind of lost in the world, and I was teaching yoga at an ayahuasca retreat. And I
mm,
was teaching a very kind of simple, breath-centered yoga that you don't get out in the marketplace, right? Like for
mm,
me, it's like the real deal, but very simple. And the medicine helped people open up to this particular approach to practice, like slowing
mm.
down, really focusing on the breath and synchronizing breath and movement. And he showed up at my door, 8 years later and said, after that retreat, my brother and I, we did that yoga every day for 2 years. And he's like, I still do it. And now I'm teaching breath work and I'm coaching people in fitness and nutrition. And
Yeah,
I mean, to hear that from
yeah,
somebody who I'd spent maybe 2 weeks with, 8 years ago,
yeah.
that kind of effect that you can have when you're really in it with people
Mm,
is it's what I need. And I think it's kind of like what the world needs. And I think like the kind of
yeah,
mass fame influencer culture
yeah,
is jumped the shark already. I mean, it's already
yeah.
become a kind of self-satirizing phenomenon. You
Totally
don't
agree.
even have to poke fun at it anymore. There's like it just
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah. I'm totally with you. Yeah, I think it's short-lived. It's already got cracks in it, definitely. And yeah, but wow, I mean that's so, resonant with me. I mean, these kinds of conversations. And I like the timeline that you're talking about. It's much more realistic. This idea that these kinds of exposures, take years of commitment and integration. It's a far cry from what's sold as a spectacular and spontaneous kind of enlightenments that people sell in packaging. It's much more humble, modest, gradual, incremental, takes years and years and years. It's not a linear journey, it's cyclical. And he came
Mm,
back, and then and then it was also, it's very Campbellian in the sense that something that he learned and incubated, now he's sharing with others. But he's not like gone to Burning Man for one ayahuasca session and now sees himself as a neo shaman coach. Like it takes time. This stuff
yeah.
takes time. uh, anyway, I love that story. Thank you for sharing it.
Yeah, I found just Phil Cousineau wrote the afterword to your book, the most recent book. And I know Phil through his book, I think it's called Archaeology of the Soul, where he
Mm,
collected a lot of quotes and writings from different figures, not just kind of spiritual philosophers, but people like Miles Davis and Ray Charles talking about soul. And yeah, he included in the afterword a quote from Kierkegaard that life must be led forward, but it can only be understood, reading it backwards, that kind of thing,
mm,
right? And I look back and I see these 7 year cycles throughout my life. And 7 years, when you're our age, it's kind of like a blink of an eye sometimes. But 7 years
unfortunately, yes.
could feel like a long time, especially when you're in the dark forest, uh, lost and trying to stumble your way through your life, right? In those moments. But these 7 year cycles, I mean, the soul to me, it moves at a slower rate than the intellect or even the spirit.
Mm,
And it takes time to slough the skin to go through that initiation.
mm.
So I think the first map that you introduce in the book is Campbell's Hero's Journey. And Phil revealed something that was a surprise to me and something I'd never heard before, but that Campbell actually meant that whole cycle, which often gets drawn as this clockwise cycle, the
Yeah,
leaving the ordinary world and then meeting the mentor and going into the underworld, battling the dragon, whatever, and then the return,
yeah,
moving around like a clock. He
yeah.
said no, he actually, when he described it, he moved his hand in a counterclockwise motion. And talk about that. That's really interesting and very
It
much in
blew me.
line with my view
It
of how the soul works.
Yeah, it blew me away when he said that. He said he wrote me back in an email because we were working together on the Campbellian side of things, and he said, "You have the stages right, but you have the direction wrong." He said mythic time goes backwards, and it does that to destroy our notion of time. And when he didn't then reference McGilchrist, but I think it falls nicely in line with McGilchrist's hemispheric dominance principle, which we're predominantly left brain because of the age of reason, which means we're thinking in linear time span. And we have hit this pivotal kind of turning point where we're at the far extreme of the rational masculine dominance, and we've lost the soul, and we've lost mythic time, and we've lost the intuition. We've lost connection with the body. We've lost connection with spirit. We've lost connection with the environment. We're too at the center of it. We're too narcissistic. When he says that it goes backwards, and smashes time, what he's saying is reclaim the mythic, which is it operates in a completely different frame of reference. Your ayahuasca sessions, my pilgrimages, when you're on them, you lose time. I mean,
Hmm.
every time I take a pilgrimage, uh, we don't know if it's Wednesday or Thursday. We don't know if it's October or November. We don't know if it's the 17th or the 15th. I mean, people don't know what's happening in the world, and that's good. That's a good thing. I don't give a damn what's happening in the world for a brief period of my life because I'm in another world.
Yeah.
We've left ordinary world. We've left ordinary consciousness. We've left ordinary time constraints. We've left ordinary reinforcements of identity. It's what I call pilgrimage, and you would agree in psychedelics possibly that it's a great disruptor.
Hmm.
And that disruptor is what Phil is saying by Campbell moving his hand in the opposite direction. It's meant to disrupt ordinary time so that you can be in the dreamscape, you can be in the bardo, you can be in the liminal.
Yeah, my wife and I, we got invited to do like an artist residency at this place down in California last year, and we started off with this kind of sound ritual. And she's an astrologer, so she brought in a lot of that astrology stuff into it. But we called it from Chronos to Kairos. And
Mm,
that was the intent of the ritual, is to take you out of that chronological, linear, segmented time and into Kairos, which is, the timeless moment of myth, of ritual, really, of any kind.
Yeah, and why would we need that? I mean, the broader thesis is, and so what? Like, okay, so there are two different brain hemispheres, there are two different, there's Chronos and there's like why is that important? There's masculine, feminine, there's there are all these ways to cut up things into dichotomies. Part of what we're saying or suggesting is for the last 400 or 500 years, we've swung too far to one extreme, and if you look carefully at history, those extremes, the pendulum is swung between them. But why is it important? I think this is, where our central theses both agree, is that we're reclaiming something vital that's invisible, and is not in the ordinary bandwidth of consciousness and isn't readily available in the materialistic dimension, and that is the soul. And that soul revival and that reanimating of the world, as Tarnas would put it, can only kind of happen in mythic time, but you can also argue that you can't get stuck in mythic time. Part of what Campbell was talking about, and Jung, is that the arc, the full arc, comes back into the world, comes back into your body, comes back into your identity, comes back into the self, the big self that Jung was talking about, can only be experienced from the point of view and reanimated in the persona. So that's the coming home. That's the integration. It's like you can spend time in the liminal. You can go on the ayahuasca. You can go on the pilgrimage. You can disrupt ordinary time. You can find yourself in the liminal bardo. You can find yourself dancing in the archetypal. You can find yourself swimming very deep in the timeless and the mythic. And we need that because there's something that's missing that only can be reclaimed there. But then that's not enough even in itself. Then there has to be the reintegration, the coming home,
Mm.
the reanimating your family life. You're a living evidence of this because you weren't out there as a yogi in the mountains of the Himalayas growing a long beard after your ayahuasca sessions and your yoga sessions. You built another life. You're married. You have a home. You live in a locale. You offer something. You contribute something. You make a living. Like it's back. You came back to the ordinary,
Mm.
but you revivified it with more of an integration. So I think you're a living example of that whole arc, and then it doesn't end there, like you may have another one left in you in this life.
We'll see. Yeah, well, let's talk about the return a little bit. I'm sure you run into this quite a lot in your pilgrimage work and probably some of the other stuff that you do too, but that return, it's also not talked about enough how painful that return can be and that attempt to reintegrate into Chronos, into our kind of modern Western reality. I mean, what happens, what happened with me, and what I see with people that I work with who are, coming back from a retreat or have gone through a dark night of the soul and looking to kind of restart their life with different value sets and all of that is like a kind of like, I mean, it's the pain of loss. When you go on a retreat with like-minded souls and you have this kind of experience, it touches something so deep and ancestral in us, this need for that kind of ritual and experience and connection and all of that. And then to go back to, what we're faced with here in the West, at least in North America and most of Europe probably and elsewhere, where everything is very superficial. People don't have time for deep conversations. You're being bombarded with advertising everywhere and all of it. I mean, I don't have to describe it. It's painful just to describe it, but that return to that is so painful to people. And there's like an almost immediate nostalgia for what they've just left. So, how do you counsel people through that transition?
Well, it's so poignant, isn't it? I'm so glad that we're talking about it because it really, this is the problem with the over commercialization of Campbell's model is like people expect to go on a heroic journey in 2 weeks and come back and it's all, it's the return is like gifted on a red carpet. It's like come
Mm.
back from your ayahuasca session and they roll out the red carpet and you have a new life.
Right,
Uh,
the hero's welcome.
the hero's welcome and also in a very neatly titrated, 2 week encounter. I mean, it's so far from that. You talk about 7 year cycles. I think that's closer, and it doesn't get talked about enough, this idea of integration. And it definitely doesn't get talked enough in the psychedelic world. I mean, everybody now in the sensationalized marketing manipulation propaganda agenda that we live in is they think that they're going to go to Peru for 5 days and come back completely transformed as if it's, an overlay of the Holy Grail. Pilgrimage is a little longer, but it equally doesn't work. It's like you do get your mind blown on pilgrimage, but that's just the disruption of the status quo and your identity. And just as painful as the preparation is that we're talking about, you and I talked about at the front of the conversation about the painful shedding of the skin and the dark night, the initiatory process. Yeah, it doesn't get enough, it doesn't end there. I mean, coming back is also a kind of reverse initiation.
Mm.
And that one always gets left out. It's almost like you win the treasure by going through the whole ordeal, but then you expect like a hero's welcome. And actually Grover there, your little Grover guy there he's a misfit.
Hmm. Yeah.
If your work is done well, you will be a misfit.
Hmm.
There won't be a hero's welcome. There won't be a celebration. People will despise you. People won't recognize you. If you've done your good soul work and you come back, let's say, better boundaried, now, like if you worked through the dark shadow of your codependency and you come back better boundaried, as an example, your world will grow smaller.
Yeah, and
People,
people may be resentful of
yeah,
your new
people who,
boundaries and integrity and all that.
yeah, exactly, people who ordinarily understood you as someone who they could vampirize and bloodsuck and get every narcissistic need, adequately compensated for through you. Now that you're boundaried, they'll drop off like flies, and they may not go easy. They may make life hard for you. And so I think you said it in this conversation, like you're signing up for a harder life. The integration is like signing up for a harder life because you've changed, but the world hasn't.
Right. You're no longer going to be well adapted to the sixth society, right? You're going to be maladapted to the sixth society because you're actually healthy.
Exactly.
And that can
You're,
fuck with the status quo.
yes, you're healthier.
Mm.
You're healthier, but your family systems and societal systems and culture at large is still beheld to this frequency that you don't fit into anymore. And so, yes, I mean, in how do I counsel? I mean, first you've got to. That's one utility of the map is that you're clear. Like sometimes I talk about it like this in the hours or days before we head home. I say to people, listen, you've had an extraordinary journey and no one will ever understand what you've gone through. And so you will land back home and people will say, how was your trip? And there
You
will
go,
be
where do I begin?
and the idea is that no one will care actually. That's one of the
Right. For
sat
the,
that's
yeah, for the real deep story, right? They'll just want to hear, oh, it was nice. Okay, great. Now I don't have to worry about it anymore.
yeah, no one will take no very few, let's say very few people will be very interested in the long version. And so you will come up with elevator pitches for the ordinary person, and then you will feel very, very shortchanged and dissatisfied. And then there will come a point where you don't talk about it at all.
Right. And you may even feel that you're shortchanging the depth of the experience that you just underwent.
That's that's what I mean. Like
Yeah.
you won't be satisfied with a short elevator 2 second. It was wonderful, and I was in the rice fields, or I was on the Himalayas, or we went to visit this temple. It was wonderful. No, you that won't cut it for you, and that's good. It's painful, but it's good because now. So I say, you're like a secret society. Shake hands to the person in the left and shake hands to the person in the right, like the fellow tribe that you've been on pilgrimage with. They're part of your secret society. You will go now into the commonplace, into the marketplace, and no one will recognize you and no one will care. But you have your brothers and your sisters in alignment that will always know what we shared together. And that impulse towards the community, the sangha as they call it, is really important. It's pivotal to your ongoing integration of the insights that you've gleaned, and the metabolization of the insights you've gleaned is that you need to stay connected with like-minded people who understand what it means to shed the skin and what it means to keep going on the journey, on the outward bound or the inward, the inward bound arc, that you have to keep going, and you're not going to be able to rely on your colleagues at work or the people that are still operating in the ordinary world. I tell people it's difficult. I tell people that you're not done. And I look back on, the last few years of people that have been on pilgrimage with me, and people are still incubating. They're still trying to find their place. And now we add another layer to this. It's not just personal. It's like the collective also matters. The whole all our civilization is on a pilgrimage and initiatory rite of passage and in the throes of changing. So it's not like it used to be that you'd leave society to come back to a society, and that society wasn't equipped to receive you, but at least it was predictable. Now we're leaving society and coming back to an even in a society or civilizational that is itself undergoing grand metamorphosis. And so
Mm.
that's another layer of this,
Yeah.
you know,
Coming back to chaos.
coming back to chaos and unformed chaos. Like
Yeah.
it's really not, we don't know where we are. We really
Mm.
don't know where we're going. We don't know what it looks like, and so, that's an extra layer of complexity, I think, that is worthy of talking about. I mean, part of what you and we have to say is that we don't have answers necessarily. We're not givers of answers. We're facilitators of working with the unknown.
Mm.
And that's different.
Yeah, I like to tell people sometimes that, don't come to me for answers, but what I can help you do. I'm really good at hearing the questions, right? And I think like if someone leaves a session or a course of counseling with me with some better questions to live out, then I've done my job.
Mm,
But I'm not in the answers game or the solutions game. But a part of it too is like the council too, right? Like you said, of the other members of the secret society,
mm,
people who have like faced the shadow, gone into a dark night of the soul, seen the light, all of the stuff that's involved with these kind of initiations. To have someone else just to talk to, like that commiseration,
mm,
the counsel. That's why I like this term counseling more than therapy, even, because it just seems so kind of human and natural for us. Like, of course, when you've undergone some kind of ordeal or an initiation, you're going to come back and you're going to have some counsel waiting for you, where people just maybe are just listening to your story and recognizing you, you know?
mm, mm. Yeah, and I think that counsel or that support that doesn't provide answers, what it instead offers is buoyancy so that someone can reclaim parts of themselves and make their own discoveries, and that takes time. So it's like you're providing micro incubation, places of incubation.
Hmm.
You're creating, even if it's just one to one, you're creating an ecosystem where there's enough rapport, love, curiosity for someone to unravel and someone to regenerate and someone to incubate the new the new self that's emerging, or the soul that's emerging. And I get this all the time, will your pilgrimage or will your course give me more tools? That, and I'm sure you get that too. And not to say that there aren't tools available in these traditions, but underlying it is still this colonialist assumption that you could extract a tool and put it in a toolkit in a world that is mechanized and somehow get in a protocol from A to B in a more rational fashion, and you could predict and control the outcome.
Mm.
You know, this idea of a manualized protocol, like they took this and I was criticizing mindfulness in its early days. I called it Mick mindfulness, and one of the reasons was it's like, oh, we'll go to India or Buddhism and we'll take this thing out of its context and we'll bring it back and we'll reduce it down and we'll manualize it into a protocol. And so everybody in the psychology world, and this is one of your critiques of what's happening with psychedelics, which I admire and I resonate with, is like, you've extracted this thing and you've colonialized it and you've made it into a mechanistic protocol. And now you're selling it as an 8-week program. And so who under the sun hasn't done an 8-week program in mindfulness based this or that? Uh, and of course, the problem with that is that it it eliminates the soul, and it eliminates, what it does is it doesn't prepare someone to live and swim in uncertainty.
Mhm.
And so when clients or students ask me, will I be more prepared for this and will I be more prepared for that? And what are the tools? And, are you training in the tools and will I have tools? What they're really saying is, can I offset my fear of uncertainty? And of course, I try to address the deeper question there, which is, by opening to uncertainty, you create more resilience. So you don't actually want a tool that takes you out of that. And this is important. I think this is really important, especially with leisure travel. The difference between pilgrimage and leisure travel. I've been writing about this and thinking about this for some time. It's like the tourist industry and travel in general wants to curate neatly packaged experiences so that there's less stress on the individual.
Mhm.
You want to go from point A to point B, and you want there to be a red carpet, and you want it to be curated and tailored, and then just a comfortable bed and a beautiful meal, and it's one photograph after
Right.
photograph
You
after
got the
photograph.
itinerary, you know what's coming next, what's on the schedule, right?
And
Yeah.
it's also easy, right? It's easy. It's
Hmm.
it's less stress. Okay. And people work in stressful environments for 50 weeks of the year, and they get 2 weeks off and they want a curated, highly indulgent and very gratifying. And okay, I'm not
Yeah.
judging
Bless
that.
them.
I'm not judging that at all. I
Yeah.
understand what it's like to be on that work wheel and to need a vacation and to need a break. But pilgrimage is different. Okay. And what I call the pilgrimage mindset is one that understands that there's great value in difficulty and challenge and disruption. And like, if, and all of this, you don't have to design the disruption. If you just go on pilgrimage in Asia, it's bound to
It'll happen.
happen. But so how do you prepare for it? So when the student says, "Can I have a tool?" and what they're really saying is, "Can you make it comfortable for me, or will I have something to rely on?" What they're saying is, I don't want to fall through the crack.
Mm.
I don't want to swim in uncertainty.
Yeah.
I don't want to be faced with ambiguity. I don't want to pay for disruption. I don't want to pay for free fall.
Mm.
But then what's happening in our societies when we have grown so good and competent at curating life so that we're comfortable with the perfect, what's it called, a smart house that knows the temperature, the right temperature for your body,
Mm.
is that we have atrophied any of our ability to swim in uncertainty and deal with ambiguity and to have pain tolerance and to have resilience. We don't have that anymore. And I see this. I see it in myself. I'm not separating myself from fellow travelers. Like, I go up to the high Himalayas with my teacher where it's untouched for 500 years. It's off the beaten path. There's no Wi-Fi, there's no restaurants, there's no hotels, there's not even transportation. It's all by foot. It could be 500 years ago up there in the Himalayas. It takes 5 days to travel up there. You're basically walking into a portal and you're basically going into this liminal time. And, 5 days up, 3 or 4 days in, no hot showers, no good meals, no comfortable bed, no this, no that. Like, I start to feel, oh, I need a Snickers bar. I need a cappuccino down.
Yeah.
And, and so it's like withdrawal of an addict. It's like detox.
Yeah.
It's like
Comfort withdrawal.
it's like comfort withdrawal,
Mm.
identity withdrawal,
Yeah.
all of the withdrawals, all of the withdrawals. But mostly our society is too comfort oriented and too gratification oriented. It's at its apex of narcissism. And so these ideas of like, I don't know who I am anymore. I'm very uncomfortable in uncertainty. I don't know what tomorrow will bring. We're reclaiming our capacity to live on the frontier.
Mm. Yeah.
And
Or to,
we are at the frontier.
yeah.
We need this skill precisely because the new world isn't going to be isn't going to arise like Atlantis out of the sea to have so we can enter in on riding white horses on a red carpet or a chariot pulled, or it's not pre-made for us. So this time requires that we have high resilience, high tolerance for uncertainty, high tolerance for ambiguity, high tolerance for vacillation, and for the rug to be pulled out from underneath us, and to look at each other and not know who we are, and not know where we're going, and not know what we can contribute. And that's what's being incubated right now. And your and my job, in a way, as part of it, is to let people have micro swims in that ocean.
Mm. Yeah. Yeah. And the only tool that's going to prepare you for that kind of uncertainty, ambiguity, all of it is a tool that dismantles, right? That dismantles undoes the kind of former structures of persona, ego.
Mm.
And that's scary for people. And I understand that for sure. But that's to me like what real spiritual practices are there for.
Mm.
And I think like, one thread that's been running through our conversation is this, I'm seeing it as a kind of echo in the personal journey with the collective journey,
Mm.
right? Like you talking about Jung saying that the collective unconscious is what initiates us. And, the personal unconscious is initiating us onto this path of individuation or wholeness or becoming who you really are, all of that. And I think again, it's like it's there in, how do I want to say this? Like what you're saying, like what we're heading into as a civilization, this great unknown. If we listen to the call of our own souls, that will lead us into those kind of initiatory journeys, the dismantling of the provisional self and all of that. That, like you say, that's what's going to help us go through this collectively. So we each
Yes.
individually have to go through this because we're going through it collectively, whether we like it or not. There's no stopping it. Look around. Things are not getting any more coherent, right? So at your own peril, you ignore that call to initiation that
Yes.
Campbell talks about. Yeah.
Yeah. Go for it voluntarily.
Yeah.
Go for it on your own volition. Let go on your own volition. Listen to the people that have already done it, and listen to their stories, and listen to what they're saying. They volunteered. They survived. They're not saying it was easy, but they said that life on the other side is better.
Right. Not easier.
Not easier, but more fulfilling.
Yeah.
And it took a long time, but they did it on their own accord. And now civilization is collapsing, and in a way you won't have the choice. So just embark now. Listen to your own intuition. It's probably already, beckoning you for the call to adventure. Now, some of us have already listened. Your voice will say it, and your call will be yours to heed, and it will speak to you in its own language, and you will have the choice to listen to it or not. But there will come a threshold, there will come a moment where that choice will no longer be yours to make, and civilization will just be at its at will absolutely be in free fall. And look, whether it be an economic, fiat currency and the whole banking system, the stock market crash. We could go back to 1920s. It's just two generations ago that lived through World War II. Don't think that this can't happen. It's inevitable. something like that on order of magnitude like that is coming, and in fact it's growing with each and every day. You can feel
Yeah,
it.
it's
You
already
can feel
happening.
it's already here.
Mhm.
Yes. That I agree with. And so listen, listen
Yeah.
to your soul.
You know, John Michael Greer,
Yes. Yeah.
he's just like, I don't know, he's a druid weirdo.
Yeah.
But he's got this thing he says that I think is really great. Collapse now and avoid the rush.
Yeah.
Like
Yes.
pointing out that we're already in it. It's
We're
already
already there.
happening.
We're already
Yeah.
there.
I
Yeah.
think like something else that I think it's important for people to hear too is that this call to initiation, often the call comes as symptomology. Like it's kind of a negative calling in a way. It's not always this positive, like beckoning you to the better life, but what I've learned through my own work and working with other people is so important to listen to our symptoms because the symptoms, I love etymology because I think it teaches us a lot that's kind of hidden in our language that we just kind of take for granted and really don't often examine. But
Yeah.
if we look at the word psychopathology, it means the suffering of the soul.
Mm.
And how does the soul cry out? I think it cries out through symptoms like what we've experienced as panic attacks and night sweats and all the rest of it, you know?
Yeah. Constriction, confinement, boredom,
Yeah. Well, think
right?
about a panic attack, right? Like, what's the universal experience of a panic attack? I thought I was dying. I was
Yes.
absolutely sure I was dying. I was having a heart
Mm.
attack or I couldn't breathe.
Yes.
And so that's echoing this kind of death that comes before rebirth in a way. It's like, yes, some part of you is trying to die.
Yeah. Yeah. I think this point is really, really important. I think you're right. You're onto something. And we both share it. It's both in our narrative. We were both having panic attacks, and we're both the therapists. So, the conventional treatment for panic attack, the gold standard is medication to remove the symptom.
Yeah.
But then
I
you cut,
Hey,
you
look,
cut your,
I took those every time I got on a plane for years. I would
mm,
take some kind of sedative because I was so terrified of having a panic attack on an airplane again.
mm,
Where I was convinced I was one step away from jumping out that fucking door because I
yes,
thought there was no oxygen in this tin cylinder.
it's a horrible feeling. It's a
Terrifying.
horrible thing. Yeah. But on the other hand, what if it's the soul saying, listen, something is awry or off here. So something deeper needs to be addressed. And I liken this to like if you severely sprain your ankle and you put, you numb it. You use something to numb it.
Yeah, like some
You
numbing cream or something like that. Yeah. Right.
Yeah, and then you walk on a sprained ankle.
Yeah.
You're numbing the signal from the soul that's alerting you to look deeper at how things aren't working so that you can address it. And if you use the conventional treatments, although I, of course, leave a place, they may have a place in some immediate crisis situation. In general, we're doing a large disservice to people learning from their soul directly and addressing what their soul is crying out for. So your point about the call to adventure being this sort of, trumpets blaring, come hither to into the new world. No, it's like just look at your dysfunction. Look at how things aren't working. Look at how painful it is. Look at how you're constricted. I mean, the boredom thing is also a really important thing. It's like underneath all the scrolling on our gadgets, what's the boredom teaching us? Well, we live superficial lives. Our cultures are vacuous.
Mm.
And so if we fill it with more digital content, we're not addressing the fundamental longing for depth and something that actually revitalizes us, something that would actually, we're malnourished and we're eating
Mm.
cotton candy. Like we're spoon feeding ourselves these small little dopamine hits in smaller and smaller and smaller increments, but on longer and longer expanses of, if you monitor your phone, how much time you spend on your phone is increasing, and then but your time span for concentration of how long a piece of content is decreasing. And so but all of that is an edifice that's situated on this idea that the boredom is alerting us to the superficiality, the malnutrition and the anorexia of our culture. And that if we had more revitalizing time, like this is a long format conversation. It takes time to warm up to another human being, to look at their face, to get a glimpse of their energy, to really listen to where they're coming from, to see that there's a joint mutual story, to see that there's something enriching and magical that happens when we listen to each other, and two points of contact on the other ends of the earth, one Bali island, one island in Canada with a similar kind of story. Two strangers meet, and after an hour and a half, there's like this concordance that I know I'm going to walk away from for the rest of the day feeling like that was the highlight of my day.
Mhm.
And something actually, enriched me and fed me.
Yeah, I was fed by it, right? Yeah. Hmm.
And so what you're talking about, the symptoms, just look at boredom, for example, or, irritation or fear or panic, depression. Why is there so much depression? I mean, it's just increasing in magnitude until it becomes epidemic. Well, are we going to mass medicate everybody? Or we're going to try to broadcast a message that says, as Krishnamurti mentioned, and as you've said, like maybe it's your soul alerting you to there's something dysfunctional about our civilization that isn't meeting your needs. And of course, I mean, I look at young people, I'm getting more and more referrals from young people who look at their future and feel hopeless and don't even know why they should bother taking a massive loan to go through 4 years of college when AI is looming. And, like they have no social skills and very, very little hope about the future. And of course they're depressed. Are we going to mass medicate all these people, or actually are their symptoms absolutely in accord and in alignment and completely appropriate with their current cultural matrix?
Hmm.
It's completely appropriate. And so what
Yeah.
should we do with them? Well, maybe they should go on journeys. Maybe they shouldn't just take the next step on the treadmill and go into $250,000 debt and go to a 4 year college that will render them absolutely useless at the end of it. Maybe should be alternatives for them, that are much more soul enriching and help them with ambiguity and uncertainty and resilience and community and spirituality and depth and integration. Maybe that's more important. Maybe that's more important for their longevity and much more better use of their time and resources, because we're trying to prepare them for initiation to an uncertain future. So the traditional means, whether they be therapy, or education, they don't work. They're not going to work. They're not going
Yeah.
to work in the same way.
Yeah, because they're all about adaptation and they're subservient to the dominant culture. So that's the agenda,
That's
whether
the
it's
agenda. They're
conventional,
arms of the agenda.
yeah, conventional insurance-based psychotherapy. Listen, that's their agenda, and that's who they answer to. No matter how kind of enlightened your therapist is, if they're reporting to insurance companies, they're
That's losing
sharing their
control.
notes, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, and we've got to like set these goals, and we've got to meet the standards and all of that stuff. Yeah. So they're ill-equipped for people who are really looking for to break out of that,
Hmm.
you know. Yeah, I mean that's part of your journey too, right? It's like, I mean, you were a kind of unconventional psychotherapist in that you incorporated your Buddhist practice and the Buddhist teachings and all of that. So you're doing this kind of CIIS blend of East and West spiritual psychotherapy, but even that became too confining for you.
And that's the relative nature of it. Okay, that what you just said, thank you for acknowledging that. I've actually heard people say that, like, how can you say that you are conventional? You broke out of a conventional when you were never conventional, but it's relative.
Hmm.
And that's the point. It's like wherever you are, you're going to start to feel this enclosure. From the outward person looking in, I had a very satisfying life, and it was always on the fringe. Buddhist psychotherapy right out of the gate. I never went to a conventional academic. I mean, I got a PhD, but it was never it was never that conventional kind of training. It was always Buddhist informed, trauma informed. It was always eclectic and integrative spirituality and science. But it doesn't matter. It's relative. It's like wherever you are, you will feel the pangs of some sort of constriction or being confined or dissatisfied. And that's the point. It's not, it doesn't measure up to any one core narrative. It's just it's following the symptoms.
Mm.
For me, for me, it still felt, even I was in a satisfying, I wasn't ever corporate. I was in private practice as a therapist, working with a niche of yogis and meditators. How can you tell me that that was stifling and that you were feeling, for me, it felt too confining. For me, Buddhism and psychotherapy, the blend as enriching it was for 20 years, at the tail end of it, it felt too it itself felt too dogmatic and too rigid. I had to incorporate astrology and cosmology and Jung and Campbell, and like I was being called for the mythic, and I wanted to travel outside of Buddhist pilgrimage routes. And last May, I got a chance to travel on the Christian Camino de Santiago. I was just obliterating all of my silos. That's the point. I needed to break out.
Mm.
I needed to find the universal. Like I needed to go to the Camino de Santiago and find the universal principle that underlies all pilgrimages so that I wasn't trapped by any one dogma. So I
Yeah,
could breathe.
right.
So I could
Hmm.
breathe.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, a teacher said to me years ago, because I always had this eclectic approach, and he said something that was really interesting that really caught me. He said that the mystic is at home in any church or temple,
Beautiful.
because the mystic is seeing through all the superficial cultural trappings of that particular tradition, right?
Yeah.
Getting down to the core of it. And I think like in an increasingly globalized world, we have to have a kind of global universal mindset, right? To tolerate difference and to be able to move into different spaces and find more points of connection outside of our particular geography or ethnicity or spiritual tradition, et cetera, right? To get out
Yeah.
of those silos, we have to
Yeah.
have a kind of, well, the kids call it the galaxy brain, you know,
Mm.
like that kind of thing, cosmic consciousness. But
Yeah.
that sounds too lofty for me. But just a kind of a global mindset.
So remember what I was saying, that the archetypal signatures of the Aquarian age, there were four of them that identified that began with D. Decentralization was one of them. Discernment was another. And another one is this idea called diversity within unity. And you need both. Okay. And that's what's missing, is that you have pockets of our societies that fall to one or the other extreme, like the woke movement is championing diversity, but its shadow is that it doesn't know how to unify people, actually.
Mm.
It just
Can't
has
tell
a
the bigger story. Yeah. Hmm.
it has is now meta narrative. Actually, it's just a crusade. I mean, it's another hegemony. It's like, if you don't agree with us, we'll slaughter you and we'll cancel you.
Well, I was just mentioning to someone this particular thing today that on its surface, it's like kind of a neo-Puritanism,
Yes,
right?
it's
But
got it's
it's,
got that religious fanaticism to it.
yeah. Well, in the purity aspect, I think is really important. Like we're on the right side of
Yeah.
history, of justice, etc. But the dark shadow of it, which I don't think the people involved in social justice movements are willing to look at just yet, is that the shadow of that is always authoritarianism,
Yes,
and
this
it's
is
easy to point to in the Catholic Church and colonialism, the Crusades, and all of that. But like, look, it's in your own movement
yeah,
that
that's the
claims a kind of
hypocrisy.
purity and rightness and righteousness.
Righteousness. Yes.
You know.
Yeah. So they've got the diversity piece, but they don't have the unity piece. And then they're
Mm,
on the other side of it is, monolithic societies that are really good are high in their quotient of unity, but they also have the authoritarian, unacceptable of differences. And so the
It's like
idea,
intolerance.
it's an underlying intolerance and otherness.
Hmm.
And the idea is, look at where we are in society with probably the highest level of polarization. We cannot even have a singular lasting conversation with people of different views anymore. There was a time in your and my lifetime, there were generations where we could sit across the table at Thanksgiving and have a political conversation at times past.
Or on television. I mean, younger people now are going back and watching old panel newscasts from the 70s, 80s, and 90s, or like Charlie Rose interviews or whatever, but they're like amazed that like people used to have conversations like this, with people
Yeah,
with opposing viewpoints, you
yeah.
know. They're amazed. They look at that stuff now with a kind of like nostalgic yearning for something they never experienced. But yeah, when we grew up, there was a lot of that.
There was a lot of that, and we've lost it. And so the idea is we're heading into a period of integration where you need both. And so here in Indonesia, there's a motto that is part of their governmental motto, but that comes from a Selender dynasty in the ninth century. It's called unity in diversity. It's still part of their motto because Indonesia is one of the largest archipelagos in the world. Its islands are inhabited by people that actually speak multiple dialects and have different cultural heritages and all this, different religions. Bali is Hindu. The rest of the islands are predominantly Muslim. Before that, there were many different kind of a plurality. And the idea is that you respect diversity, and this goes to your point about the universal mythical quality of all the spiritual traditions. Well, you can't just deny the differences between them, because the differences between Christianity and Sufism and Tantric Buddhism, the differences are important. You can't just whitewash it by saying universally they're all the same.
Right. It's all one
But
baby.
it's
Yeah.
all one, because that's kind of it denies a kind of high resolution view of things that, in contrast, acknowledges and sees important differences.
Mm.
But if you just stay at the surface and you see all the differences and you fight amongst, for market share, and you get enamored by your own echo chamber. And so that's where the diversity needs its counterpart of unity. It needs something to fall back on to see some common universal aspect.
Right. Through like
And
mystic or mythic vision. Yeah.
and that's what happened to me on my journey, because when I found that alchemical motto, Salve et Coagula, it was a game changer for me, because suddenly all the domains of my interest, whether it be the mythic lens of Campbell, the psychological lens of Jung, the tantric lens of the Tibetans, or the cosmological lens shared in common by all these great sky-seeking, sky-gazing cultures. Solve coagula, it was a central premise of all of the maps. A solve coagula is a Latin phrase for your listeners that describes the process of dissolution and rebirth or reconstitution. Solve, to dissolve, a coagula, to come together again. It characterizes the heroic arc. It characterizes the path of individuation. It characterizes rebirth from a Tibetan standpoint, and it characterizes the long 25-year cycle, 25,000-year cycle. And it's there in pilgrimage, and it's there in psychedelics. Like if you look at a
Yeah.
micro journey and you look at what a good therapy session should do, or a series of therapy sessions, or you look at what pilgrimage is designed to do, or you look at what psychedelics is designed to do, you are helping facilitate someone to go through this disillusion and reclaiming something and coming back into integration. Once I saw that, then I saw a surefire way of connecting all these maps, and it was very reaffirming. Now, does that obliterate the important differences between them, the nuances behind? No, no. There are very important contributions that are made from Jung that are not discussed in Tibetan Buddhism that I think are really important.
Especially for
So,
Westerners, yeah.
for sure,
Hmm.
exactly. Yeah. So I think this idea of the archetype of unity and diversity, you need both. And it's helpful for listeners to start looking at the world and seeing places where they're in balance, so they know what their counterparty is to invite back to the table.
Yeah, I think, yeah, that's why Joseph Campbell is so important, because he was bringing that kind of comparative mythology, comparative religious studies to the masses,
Hmm.
you know.
Yeah, so beautiful what he
Like he
did.
myth pilled half the world and is still doing so, through his legacy.
Yeah.
Yeah, and he was bringing that big vision, right? And but not, like you said, not ignoring the differences, because the differences are beautiful.
Yeah.
Yeah, and so it's like about a valuing of difference and diversity.
And the differences are, like in the Buddhist tradition, they call them skillful applications or skillful means, upaya. Their differences are important because they address the different predilections of all the different kinds of beings and personalities. Like
Right.
one size fits all is not the way to go. It's
Yeah.
definitely not the way to go. But on the other hand, once you find a little scoop of something that works for you, you have to find a way to the universal. And so you yoke these two together. Otherwise, you get into proselytizing and and venerating a golden calf. Like that's, you know, and as you say, the social justice movement has fallen prey to this. It doesn't recognize its own shadow. It doesn't recognize how it has the traumatized becomes the traumatizer. It doesn't see that.
Yeah, and I mean, in the same respect, the kind of new Christian right,
Mm,
it's like there's something to do with like not being able to recognize the shadow. It's like a lack of awareness of history as well. Like something that Jung and James Hillman and others thought was so important, or a kind of crucial aspect of any depth psychology, was a kind of historical education. It's completely important. And it's like that's in your book too. It's like you're going all the way back to the Greeks and beyond, right? I guess with the Tibetan Buddhism. And we have to understand all of that too. And I think that's part of embracing diversity and change in these big aeonic cycles and all of it. And it's like also the looking back part of it too, that counterclockwise motion, right?
yeah, it goes back to that Phil Cousineau and Joseph Campbell idea of a reverse cycle, counterclockwise. I used to podcast a little bit, and I started my podcast with this presenting this idea to one of our guests. You have to go back in order to go forward. That's reclaiming. You have to go back and revisit your history. And we do that in psychotherapy. And you may do that in psychedelics naturally and on pilgrimage too, and as a civilizational too. If you look at the interesting things that are happening across the planet right now, there is this movement towards changing the historical narrative. Our narrative, for example, about civilization is changing dramatically with the unearthing of different civilizational sites like Göbekli Tepe in southern Turkey.
Hmm.
Graham Hancock has been good at this, and for whatever concerns you might have about his personality and his agenda, he's putting forth a disrupting. He's putting forth a very disrupting hypothesis about our civilization being, incorrect about its history, and that he calls us a civilization that suffers from amnesia, and that somehow our narrative that we're taught in school is that as a civilization we go from hunter gatherers all of a sudden to building high complex civilization like in ancient Egypt. And somehow we make a vast jump from being hunter gatherers and sort of small network uh, cohorts to making high civilization structures that even today we don't know, that defy logic.
Hmm.
And then we are unearthing, literally unearthing civilizations right now in the Amazon. They just recently found one with LiDAR technology. The new discoveries underneath Khafre Pyramid, just recently. We're talking just in the last year.
Hmm.
Göbekli Tepe certainly was in the 90s and late and early 2000s, but Göbekli Tepe, is a cosmologically informed site in southern Anatolia that radically shifts the timeline about civilization builders by 5,000 years. And I've just recently visited Gunung Padang in Indonesia, my sister island here in Java, which is, they say, is probably on order of 20,000 years old. We're talking about lost civilizations that change the timeline. Why is this important? Because it fits the disruptive nature. It's an archetype. It's a disruptor. It's saying you don't know who you are. It's
Right.
saying it's just like you and I were informed by depth psychology. We go into the depths and we unearth like archaeology.
Hmm.
But literally in archaeology, we are making new
Yes.
inroads and discoveries about our
Yeah.
collective. And
Yeah.
we're reclaiming some ancient science, such as the precession of the equinoxes, such as this idea that we move in 25,000 year cycles, which was lost. It was part and parcel, part of every sky gazing culture across the planet. And we are now revisiting that, and we are finding in that the mirror reflection of who we are as a civilization, where we have come from, the errors of our ways, so that we can make a great atonement, we can make a great course correction, so that we can recalibrate and reorient ourselves for future civilization building. That's
Yeah.
all happening right now.
Yeah. Yeah. As you're kind of laying this out, I can't help but think about narrative therapy.
Mm,
Right. So in narrative therapy, if you find that your life isn't working, or you're kind of oppressed by the dominant narrative of your life that's been handed to you from your family and society, and that you've kind of unconsciously bought into, right? And you start to reach those friction points, you go, the story isn't who I really am, right? Or
it's too
what,
narrow.
yeah, or it's not where I don't find any meaning in it, that kind of thing, right? And so part of the process of narrative therapy is going back, doing the archaeology on your life, and looking for those other alternative stories and storylines and story arcs. And so what they call doing that is thickening the narrative, thickening the story, right?
Mm,
Making it more complex and including stuff that contradicts or challenges that dominant narrative.
mm.
And I've never thought about this in a kind of a bigger sense of like when you're talking about like when we're unearthing this evidence that there was other civilizations in North America and South America and et cetera. And but it's kind of like doing a narrative therapy on the dominant Western cultural narrative
Yeah.
of like
Yeah,
white superiority and all of it, right?
it fits
And
this
the
idea
rightness
of
of Christianity and progress and all of that. No, we got to do narrative therapy because this narrative ain't working for most people now.
it's too narrow, and it
Hmm.
fits the thing, the statement also from alchemy: as above so below, as
Yeah.
within so without. As the narrative therapy is like the personal, and the archaeology, that uncovering old civilizations, is like the collective. Both are happening. We're like making
Yeah.
discoveries out of the ground. It's so metaphoric and
I
so
know.
rich.
And it's like, you know, as we just kind of notice these correspondences between the personal and the collective on all these different levels, it's just like to me more evidence
Yeah.
that the of like this great mystery, And at the end of it, it's like I don't have a fig. I'm Grover, man. I'm like I don't know, but there's some crazy correspondences in this world. So even if you don't buy Jung's idea of a collective unconscious, or I don't know, whatever the model is, it's like, look, you can't deny the evidence, man.
Mm.
And even that to me is just therapeutic, that realization that like there's a greater mystery at work here, and there is interrelatedness between my personal self and the great self or the world,
Yeah.
my soul and the anima mundi, the world
Yes.
soul.
Yes.
Yeah. And that is a kind of salve for the malaise of modernity, I think.
And you count. You if you realize that, and it
Yeah.
helped orient you in the world, your movement through the world in that trajectory or in that vein or with that perspective or that paradigm, you can see you're being called to make a contribution. So this deals with the fundamental malaise of how insignificant we are.
Mm.
It's not the incubation of the insignificance wasn't to help me become more famous. That was the wrong tool for the problem, or the wrong solve for the problem. The incubation of insignificance was needed so that there wasn't as much a narcissistic overcompensation. There was an acceptance of a disavowed part of me. But I still have to orient myself in the world now. And now that I have at my disposal more time, energy, and internal resources, I can still now make a greater contribution. It's just not to inflate myself.
Yeah, right. I was kind of trying to wrap my head around the incubation of irrelevance or insignificance. And yeah, I can see now what you're pointing to is a cultivation or cultivation sounds like it's something I'm doing, but a cultivation of a kind of humility. What Jung might call a relativizing of the ego,
Mm,
dethroning the CEO in the head, that kind of
mm,
thing.
mm.
Yeah, and then, but that doesn't mean
You don't
that what you
operate in the
do is
world.
irrelevant or you're
Yeah,
insignificant. No, you actually do have an effect because we see these correspondences between the personal and the collective.
yeah,
Yeah, between this time right now and everything throughout time. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. And it's actually a pivotal time. What we do right now, your listener who heeds the call of their soul and ventures forth voluntarily into the unknown for initiation through a 7 year process or a 5 year process or whatever like real timeline befalls them as they come through the dark night of the soul, they will find this moment of disintegration and meaninglessness and insignificance, and they'll reclaim that part of their humanity and humility. But then it will be from that impetus that they will actually make a more modest and purposeful contribution, because civilization will need them to have that humility to orient in the world as we recreate it together. That's the better impulse. And this is what Jung was afraid of, is that the first 500 years, it would be our more grandiose, narcissistic, competitive instincts that vie for supremacy, almost like children with high technology. It's like nuclear bombs and AI, and yet we're emotionally infants.
Hmm.
And that's the great danger that is ahead of us. So how do we grow up? Well, you become more humble.
Hmm. Yeah.
It's you become more modest. You don't have to change the world and be at the top of the pyramid. You just have to like understand your world and keep your impulses under control and steadily make a more modest contribution, and that will be enough. And take great pride in that. Go ahead and take great pride. It's great. That's a great thing.
Totally. And it's not only not well, it's enough, but it's actually what's needed.
It's what's needed. Yeah.
Right. Take care of your little corner of the world, however you can. If more of us do that, then the world's going to be taken care of.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, we gotta go, but this has been really great, man. I had a feeling we were going to be like on the same page about a lot of stuff, and we were. It's been really nice to meet you.
Yeah, please come to Bali anytime. Bring your astrologer wife, and we'll keep the conversation alive and going as the world beckons us into the new civilization. This is just the beginning, Brian. Thank you so much.
Yeah, man. Well, where can people go if they want to find out more about you and your work?
They can go to milesneale.com, and there they'll find my pilgrimages and my books and whatever else they may be looking for.
Right. And you still do one-on-one work with people, right?
I do, yeah. It's more limited these days because I really am trying to shift into more pilgrimages. I'm really revitalized by the pilgrimages. Not that I'm not revitalized by my work, but I spent so many years with a big clientele. And, it's become more than I can tolerate, especially online. I don't know if you do online, but I can only do like 3 sessions online without losing, my momentum and energy. So it's more of
Yeah.
a boutique little practice that I have left remaining, and mostly I'm out on the road in real world, in real time, in sacred spaces, doing this kind of group work.
Hmm. Yeah, I mean, I think that's a really good point. I only see maximum like 3 clients a day too. Not just because it's online, but also because if you're working deeply with people, that's like all the capacity I have because, professional boundaries aside, I'm carrying people's stories with me that I'm working with all the time. And I feel like in order to honor them and their story and the work that we're doing, I'm going
Yeah.
to limit it.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
yeah, I'm wary of anyone who's, seeing like 8 clients a day or whatever with 15-minute breaks in between. We see behind the scenes the kind of burnout and stuff that
Yeah.
goes on with
Yeah.
people at that kind of
And we
pace
also
of
did that. I
practice.
mean, I did that. I did that for many
Well,
years. I
look,
mean,
if you got an office in downtown Manhattan, you better be keeping up with the bills.
yeah. Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
So that
Yep.
part of the bigger lifestyle shift is also being able to give more time and devotion to the things that really matter and doing it
Exactly.
well. And
Exactly.
that's a beautiful gift for us as practitioners, but also I think the people that we work with too.
Yep. Yep.
Coming in with our cups mostly full anyway. Right? There's always maybe a little bit of neediness or longing in there in the mix,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
whatever, we're human.
Yeah. 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 Yeah.
All right, man. Well, take care and we'll see you down the road.
Thanks, Brian. Take good care.
Cheers. Bye bye.